All right. I'm on a mission to help us improve how we age, working on being fit and healthy from the inside out. And one person I always love to learn from and follow is Dr. Davis. And I got him back on the show today because I listen to everything he says, and I think you need to hear and learn more about what he's talking about. If you're my age, you're kind of freaking out about these under eye areas, my skin health, and the creepy skin when I do downward dog in the morning and look down, like, whose body is this? So I'm about recreating myself currently so I can be my best self in the future. And Dr. Davis is helping us do that. So thank you.
Well, thanks for having me back, Deb.
Yeah. So to talk about what you've been talking about on your podcast, which is amazing podcast. Everyone wants to geek out on specific topics about how to improve our skin health and what we can do about it. Because I've been trying all these different lotions and potions and treatments, and I feel like my intuition is telling me I need to start thinking what it's going on inside to improve my skin health. That what I once did before isn't quite the same. And I always say, don't blame the aging process, embrace it and change how we do things because we can take ownership, including skin health.
Well, I'm always impressed, Deb, about how much ladies know about topical products. They know all about all the things you can do, as well as the cosmetic and aesthetic things you can do, like microneedling and red light. All ladies are very savvy about these kinds of things. So I've always been surprised that most ladies, unlike you, have not yet appreciated the power of skin health and appearance and beauty from the inside out.
Mhm.
And it's much more powerful than what you can achieve topically because the epidermis, the external layer of skin, is by design largely impenetrable to protect you. So you don't handle, say, laundry detergent or glass cleaner and absorb it into your body readily. So you want to have a largely impenetrable epidermis. So accessing things orally and allowing them to get to the dermal layer of skin is a very powerful thing. This conversation for me, Deb, got started when I recognized the power of the microbe Lactobacillus reuteri, which is a microbe that's been known about for 60 years, but its full benefit wasn't appreciated until just a few years ago, when an MIT group they were working on cancer because this microbe, Lactobacillus reuteri, has been shown to have very potent anti-cancer effects, particularly in colon cancer cells. So they're giving it to mice to study its cancer protecting effects, and they start to see all these incredible things they did not expect, like their fur grew very rapidly, became thick, and as they said, luxuriant. Their skin wounds, if they inflicted skin wounds, healed in half normal time. The dermal layer of skin increased not a little bit, dramatically because of accumulation of collagen, and it happened very quickly. And there were other effects also. They didn't get fat, they didn't get old. So even if they fed these mice a fast food mimicking diet, garbage foods,
Mhm.
white flour, hydrogenated oils, fried foods, etc., animals who didn't have the microbe got fat and old. Animals who got the reuteri with a crappy diet stayed young and slender. So spectacular observations. The problem is that microbe was commercially available at the time, but it was made only for infants. So I got a hold of it and I reasoned, well, if we had this minuscule dose of no benefit to adults, how do we increase it? Well, you could buy the original product. By the way, we've gotten away from that original product, but going back now 6 years, if you got that original product and you want to get an adult dose, you'd have to take about 30 tablets a day, which is ridiculous. It's very expensive. It's kind of gross. It had a bunch of additives in it. So I got the microbe and I fermented it as something that looks and smells like yogurt. It's not yogurt. It's just a way to increase bacterial counts. We get about 300 billion microbes. We did flow cytometry, counted the microbes, 300 billion per half cup serving. And Deb, everything that was seen in mice. This usually does not happen. Usually, stuff seen in mice does not translate fully into the human experience. But in this case, so far, everything seen in mice has played out in humans, including the smoothing of the skin, increased dermal collagen, increased skin moisture, as well as other effects. A lot of these effects are mediated by the hormone oxytocin, the hormone of love and empathy. I also call oxytocin, this is a little off topic, but I also call it the hormone of shape and body composition, because not only does your facial features change, your body shape changes too, because we're seeing abdominal fat recede dramatically and a restoration of youthful musculature. So as we age, we lose about a third of our muscle. And
Mm-hmm.
that's true in your arms, shoulders, neck, thighs, buttocks, and face. You lose facial muscle. And if anybody engages in a weight loss program, regardless of the method, it could be cutting calories, could be a GLP-1 agonist. I hope no one here does that, or a bariatric procedure. You will lose facial fat and facial muscle. That's why people say things like, "Oh, she's got Ozempic face," because she lost a bunch of weight,
Muscle.
which there was a lot of muscle and
Mm-hmm.
fat, but also fat in the face. And these people look 10 to 20 years younger. So we're doing something different. We're provoking oxytocin that increases musculature, including in the face, and increases dermal collagen. So we did a small clinical trial, and ladies lost their crow's feet over 90 days. The depth of smile lines was reduced. Even forehead wrinkles and nasolabial fold, those are deeper wrinkles that require a greater quantity of collagen. Those start to recede. And they had other benefits as well in shape and body composition, including a reduction in waist circumference. So we've stumbled on a way. So we did that clinical trial for skin, because I'm always shocked by this. I tell ladies about this, and they say, okay, so you're saying if we get reuteri, we're more empathetic, more generous, our libidos go up. If we give it to our husbands, they get a rise in testosterone. My healing is faster, my immune system is better, but I don't care about that. I just want better skin. So I said, what? So we did a small clinical trial just to validate this for the ladies, 25 ladies, and this was a combination of lactobacillus reuteri. Now, I get concerned about diet, as you know.
Yeah.
And one of the consequences of this nonsense to cut saturated fat and cholesterol, terrible advice, would cause people to abandon consumption of organ meats, rich in collagen and hyaluronic acid. So I put those into the formulation. I also, the modern diet's also very carotenoid depleted. If people are eating fast food and processed food and ultra processed foods, they're getting very little in the way of carotenoids. And carotenoids are very important for skin health and other aspects of health, because you can't synthesize carotenoids. It has to come from diet. But if you're eating an unhealthy diet, you're not getting carotenoids. So I threw in astaxanthin into the mix. So reuteri, collagen, hyaluronic acid, astaxanthin, as a member of the carotenoid family. It's the most potent of all carotenoids. And we did this in ladies, and they were thrilled over 90 days. We did something called high resolution skin ultrasound, which measures the thickness of the dermal layer of skin. You know, it's one thing to look at somebody and say, I think their wrinkles are a little less, but these are objective measures. We measured the thickness of the dermal layer. It increased dramatically. So the ladies who participated were very excited because they got better skin, loss of wrinkles, and their waists shrunk dramatically, as much as 8.5 inches. And this was, Deb, no change in diet, no change in exercise, just take these 4 things, period. That was it.
Yeah.
That also launched a whole new effort to explore that further in clinical trials. But in the meantime, we have this way. So reuteri at high counts, 40 billion counts per day, higher in yogurt. So ladies have the option of taking these products and making yogurt out of it if you want to. And that can be really important if you have SIBO, for instance, small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, because it really helps. If you've got SIBO, and for the ladies who don't know what that is, it means that fecal microbes that are supposed to be living in your colon, where they belong, have ascended into the 24 feet of small intestine, where they are very inflammatory. And they release their toxins into your bloodstream, endotoxemia. And you may experience that as anxiety, dry skin, redness, skin rashes, eczema, psoriasis, seborrhea, rosacea, all kinds of other effects, cognitive impairment, weight gain, especially in the abdomen, higher blood glucose, higher blood sugar. This all originates in the microbiome. Well, one of the other behaviors of reuteri is that it colonizes. This is very unique. Yep. It colonizes the small intestine. Most microbes can't do that. Most healthy, probiotic species can't do that. Reuteri has the unique capacity to colonize the small intestine, where it takes up residence and produces what are called bacteriocins. These are natural antibiotics that kill fecal microbes. So it
Mm.
reduces endotoxemia, those toxic compounds from fecal microbes in your small intestine. And people experience not just a reduction in bloating and diarrhea and anxiety and depression and suicidal thought, all those things recede in most cases, but they also get smoother, moister skin because you're no longer inflamed. So
Yeah.
there's that. So we have this combination of things we've been doing. And by the way, Deb, all these things, reuteri, collagen,
Mm.
hyaluronic acid, the carotenoid astaxanthin, we're not treating things. We're restoring factors lost from modern people. So
Hmm.
that's why we don't have to talk about side effects and inadvertent adverse effect because these you get benefits because we're restoring things you should have had as
Mm.
part of your life all along.
Hmm. How do we get lower in it? I mean, what do you think happens that we get so depleted in L-reuteri?
So lactobacillus species like L. reuteri are very susceptible to common antibiotics. So let's say one of your listeners took amoxicillin 25 years ago
Mm.
for an upper respiratory or urinary tract infection. Well, yeah, it took care of the infection and killed off all your reuteri. And so even though this, interestingly, this microbe is ubiquitous in hunter-gatherer populations. These are people living in the Brazilian rainforest or the jungles of New Guinea or the east coast of Africa savannas. People unexposed to antibiotics and glyphosate and processed foods, etc. They all have reuteri.
Mm.
Wild animals, antelope, beavers, deer, they all have reuteri. Almost none of us have reuteri. About 1 in 25 people still have it. The vast majority, 24 out of 25, no longer have it, and
Mm.
thereby have lost the capacity for oxytocin and all its benefits on skin, body shape, and
Hmm.
emotions, and have lost its ability to colonize the small bowel. And I think that's probably a big part of the reason why 150 million Americans or more, that is half the US population, now has SIBO.
Mm.
And that is relevant to many
Yeah.
aspects of health, but including skin health. SIBO and thereby endotoxemia, a big
Mhm.
player in damaging your skin.
Mm. Wow. That's amazing. I always love going down these rabbit holes and look at the why and putting the missing pieces of a puzzle together to figure out, all right, how does that work? How does everyone get depleted in L-reuteri? You test for L-reuteri. If we're testing a stool test is going to be the large intestine bacteria in there, how do you know test L-reuteri on people?
So you need to use a method that uses PCR, polymerase chain reaction, or
Mm.
some method of complete DNA sequencing. So you'll see some of the test platforms still use what are called 16S ribosomal RNA methods. I point that out because those methods are not very deep. And they'll say things like, you don't have lactobacillus. And you
Mhm.
say, well, lactobacillus what? Lactobacillus brevis, lactobacillus acidophilus, lactobacillus. There's many lactobacilli. So you need one that will drill down and say, oh, you do have or don't have lactobacillus reuteri.
Mm.
These tend to be a little more expensive, but there's a number of platforms that will do that for you. And as time goes on, more and more of the testing platforms are going towards complete DNA sequencing.
Mhm.
So there's one, I'm blanking on the brand names because we actually don't do that much formal testing
Okay.
outside of research. So
Mm.
the commercial platforms, the one I wouldn't use, I would not use Viome, I would not use GI Map
Mhm.
or
They're not showing.
GISX. But
Okay.
there are other platforms that tend to be a little more expensive in the $500 to $700 range that will tell you. But you know what? The method to restore reuteri, Deb, is so benign, so easy, so beneficial. It's really
Mhm.
not that important to know if you have it at the
Yeah.
start.
Yeah. Oh, I was just thinking for studies, how would you find out when you're doing studies if they have L-reuteri or not? But most people
As
don't.
As it happens, I was just working on the study, the design of the study, where we're going to do just that to validate what others have seen. That
Mhm.
is, how is it true that most do not have this? And one of the things we're going to do is correlate this with psychological and well-being measures, because it's
Mm.
my belief, based on the existing evidence, that people who have reuteri are better people. They're more empathetic. They're more generous. They desire the company, the companionship of other people, and they're more accepting of other people's opinions. People who lack reuteri and thereby oxytocin, I believe, we're going to try to prove that what the psychology community has been saying for the last 60 years, which is narcissistic behavior, is sharply on the rise. So they've been formally measuring this. I was shocked by this.
Yeah.
Since 1963, they ask questions like this: true or false? I am a very important person in this world. In 1963, 13% of people said, yeah, that's true for me. Now it's more like 83%. Now, there's more to this than of course, reuteri and oxytocin. There may be social media, consumerist society. Blah, blah. You and I don't have control over that. But we
Mhm.
do have control over perhaps restoring this microbe response for oxytocin, lactobacillus reuteri. And you get smoother skin and youthful body shape in the process.
So can you measure oxytocin hormone in, so if you're doing a test, would you measure L-reuteri and oxytocin levels?
You can, but you can't do it clinically. You have to do it in the
Mm.
setting of a research trial. So we've done it in animals, we've done it in humans. It's a very fussy. There's a big debate on how to best measure oxytocin. So we're grappling with that right now. It's called an ELISA, an enzyme linked immunosorbent assay. And so we're doing that. We're working out some of the kinks. We're going to repeat some of our clinical trials because we're really struggling with measuring oxytocin. But three groups, MIT, a group at Baylor in Texas, another University of Texas group, and now a Chinese group have all corroborated that reuteri provokes release of oxytocin, and we're working on that also.
Would you have any indication through heart rate variability testing at all to see if oxytocin, I don't know, I just intuitively I go to thinking the nervous system, if you're talking about, personalities, if you're in sympathetic dominance
Mm.
versus more resiliency going back and forth, parasympathetic to sympathetic, and the role of heart rate variability in the vagal nerve, vagal tone in this connection because of the SIBO and small intestinal bacterial overgrowth.
Have you tapped into an extremely interesting conversation for which we need better evidence? But we do know that reuteri sends a signal to your brain through the vagus nerve. Because if you cut the vagus nerve in an animal, can't do that in human,
Mm-hmm.
but if you cut the vagus nerve in an animal, the entire process is blocked. You don't get the skin effects, don't get the emotional effect, none of that. So a lot of this is mediated via the vagus nerve. That has to be explored further, as you point out, heart rate variability. And it's my belief also that reuteri and oxytocin likely have dramatic heart benefits also. It may be one of the most underappreciated ways to address risk for various forms of heart disease. I have a friend. This is pure anecdote, Deb, pure anecdote. A nice woman, early 60s, and out of the blue, she had an EKG, and it showed what's called a left bundle branch block. That is a severe conduction defect. It's like having a short circuit in your house, and your refrigerator is not going to work anymore, right? So she had so they did an echocardiogram, and she had lost about half the heart muscle strength in her left ventricle, the main pumping chamber. So her ejection fraction had dropped about 30%, normal is about 55, 60%. So she had a cardiomyopathy, a heart muscle disease, probably from a viral infection she had a few months earlier, where she was laid up in bed. Well, she goes to the local cardiologists and they put her on the usual drugs, beta blockers, ACE inhibitors, blood thinners. They're talking about, because of the conduction defect, they're talking about what's called biventricular pacemakers, two pacemakers, one for the right side, one for the left side, or a defibrillator to resuscitate her should she die. So this is a healthy woman who exercises, right? And so she tells me about this. I said, hey, think about this. This is very preliminary. If you get reuteri and thereby oxytocin, we get a dramatic increase in skeletal muscle.
Mm-hmm.
So older people have a restoration of youthful musculature, right? Well, the heart muscle is filled with oxytocin receptors. They must
Mm.
be there for a reason. Could that skeletal muscle effect apply to cardiac muscle? Well, she does the reuteri, thereby oxytocin. Her
Mm.
ejection fraction normalizes. And this is something I've never seen before. In my 30 years in cardiology, I've never seen this before. The left bundle branch block short circuit went back to normal.
Wow.
Now, this is proof of nothing, one person,
Yeah.
but it's a hint. I think we're going to enter a new age of an understanding of reuteri, other microbes, in this case, oxytocin and vagal influences over heart health. Because this is not supposed to happen. This is like saying, hey, my pancreatic cancer is now gone. It doesn't
Mm.
happen. So here in this instance, she had something spectacular happen that wasn't supposed to happen. Now, sadly, my colleagues who saw this, rather than saying, hey, what did you do? I need to know about this. Instead, they said, who knows? Coincidence. We don't care.
Yeah.
Stay on the
Out of
drugs.
curiosity. Yeah.
Yep. Yep.
So that's what I've been diving into the vagal nerve, and I did a webinar on heart rate variability and vagal nerve stimulation with a company called Nuvana Life, and their Zen device that goes in your left ear to stimulate your vagal nerve. And we're creating a 30-day challenge to have people use this device 4 times a week and measure their heart rate variability. So we're doing our own study to see, do you have what are your signs and symptoms? How are you feeling now? And then do we see any changes, ideally more than 30 days, to see if your vagal nerve stimulation is improving your vagal tone via measuring with heart rate variability and looking
Very
at the
interesting.
breakdown. Yeah. So it's fascinating when I go down these rabbit holes of the role of the vagus nerve, that maybe we work backwards, start vagus nerve stimulation and strengthen that, work on the microbiome, getting L. reuteri, and you're saying that will improve oxytocin, and oxytocin will improve so many different areas in our health. It's pretty fascinating
And
stuff.
that's one microbe, Deb. This is not trillion, this is one microbial
Mm.
species. There are others, maybe not quite as interesting as reuteri, but there are others with very interesting effect. One thing that ladies need to know relevant to a skin conversation is the power of fermented foods.
Mhm.
But this is kind of counterintuitive because you don't think of eating fermented sauerkraut or kimchi or kefir or veggies you ferment on your kitchen counter. You don't think of those as being helpful for skin, but they are. But it's kind of a convoluted pathway. So the crazy thing about these fermented foods, so let's say you've got some kimchi or some sauerkraut you fermented, and it's not just sauerkraut and brine and vinegar, it's actually fermented sauerkraut, which is very easy to do, by the way. So these fermented foods, typically fermented at room temperature, have species, not reuteri, other species. Leuconostoc mesenteroides, Pediococcus species, other species. And these species, you ingest that, say, sauerkraut, they don't take up residence in your GI tract like reuteri does. They just pass through. So what good are they?
Mhm.
Well, as they pass through, they somehow feed via metabolites beneficial species. These are
Mhm.
species that produce the fatty acid butyric acid or butyrate. These are
Mhm.
species like Fecalibacterium or Akkermansia. So fermented foods with those unique microbes feed those beneficial butyrate producing species. We say butyrogenic species. That butyrate, in addition to lowering your blood pressure, blood sugar, reducing abdominal fat, having other beneficials like sleep, mood, also goes to your skin
Mhm.
and it acidifies the skin. So you may know that healthy skin is much more acidic than unhealthy skin. So if we took the skin of
Mhm.
people with acne, eczema, seborrhea, psoriasis, rosacea, they have less acidic skin, typically a pH about 5.5.
Mhm.
People who have healthy skin have a pH about 4.5. You may recall from high school biology or chemistry that the pH scale is logarithmic. So
Mhm.
4.5 is tenfold more acidic. Well, that's important because skin acidity discourages the proliferation of bad skin pathogen called Staphylococcus aureus. So if you have acne or eczema or psoriasis, any of those conditions, you have body wide, you're covered with Staphylococcus aureus, this pathogen. When you acidify the skin, that a process that begins with fermented foods, and the pH drops, it suppresses Staphylococcus aureus and allows the dominance of a healthy we say commensal, a healthy microbe called Staphylococcus epidermidis. That is a major advantage in skin health. So fermented foods, cultivate healthy species that produce butyrate. Butyrate acidifies the skin, shifts the balance away from Staphylococcus aureus towards Staphylococcus epidermidis. And I know it's kind of convoluted, but if you do that, no one has to remember all that. The thing to remember is fermented foods start the process, and you get much better skin over time. Less redness, less irritation, less dryness. And then combine that, of course, with all the benefits you get from reuteri, restoration of collagen, hyaluronic acid, carotenoids, and you have an extremely powerful program for skin health and appearance.
So with the four things you said earlier is organ meats, L-reuteri, we can take it, or I like to make the yogurt, but I find a lot of people we can talk about don't want to make yogurt. No, it's super easy. It takes me like 5 minutes, but I just put mine in the fridge this morning. I just finished some, making some. But and then what are the other two things? You said astaxanthin, and then what else are the four things in the program to help skin health?
So the collagen and hyaluronic acid would have been
Collagen.
present. Your great grandma got it because she would eat brain and tongue
Yeah,
and stomach. Well, modern people are so squeamish about those kinds of things. Very few people
with
do
me.
that anymore, at least in the US. And
Mm-hmm.
so, and some people have turned to bone broth. Don't do that.
Mm-hmm.
Bone broth is notorious for lead content,
Yeah, you taught me that.
especially if you use prolonged boiling and the addition of vinegar. So we don't do that. You can make soups using some of the bones and skin and tendons and ligaments and meat and fat and all that. But don't use prolonged boiling, no more than 3 to 4 hours, and never add vinegar because that's how you extract lead from the bones. So that's
Mm.
one way to get some collagen. You can also slow cook tough cuts of meat that mobilizes some of the collagen. Most modern people don't have the time or interest in doing these things. So it's the convenient way to do it is to get a collagen supplement. Now, what I did though, so there's multiple sources of collagen. Most popular are bovine, cow, as well as porcine and chicken. But I used marine sourced. So
Mm.
people would debate these kind of things. What type of collagen is in there? Type
Yes.
1, type 3, type 4. Ignore all that. That does
Mm.
not make any difference at all. What does matter is the relative content of di and tripeptides that are resistant to human digestion. So, for instance, there's a tripeptide, 3 amino acid long,
Mm-hmm.
called glyprohip, glycine, proline, hydroxyproline. So people for years were skeptical that collagen had any benefit over and above, say, a piece of beef or an egg, because it's
Mm-hmm.
just a protein, and we break proteins down as single amino acids. Well, collagen's unique. It has sequences, these di and tripeptides, 2 amino acid, 3 amino acid long peptides, like the glyprohip or glypro or prohip, glyhip, that don't get digested. And if you rate, this has been done in studies, if you radioactively label them, they remain intact. They don't get digested down as single amino acids. They go to your skin where they stimulate
Mm.
dermal collagen. They go to your joint cartilage where it stimulates joint cartilage. And so we now know collagen is unique. Now, the unique thing about many marine sources, and I say many, not all, because marine source can be very variable. Did it come from a bony fish? Did it come from cartilaginous fish? Were the scales included? What's the species? So there's a lot of variation. But we have preparations that are very enriched in di and tripeptides and are therefore as effective as, say, bovine chicken at 1/10 of the dose.
Mm.
But it increases convenience because if you use bovine, which is a fine product, you got to use big scoops.
Yeah.
But if you want to put it in a capsule, for instance, you can't use bovine. It's too much. So we use marine sourced, not because it's
Mm.
more effective, but because it's equally effective at a much lower dose, 1/10 of the dose. So that's the collagen. And now hyaluronic acid, Deb, is so interesting. Ladies say, "Oh, don't tell me about hyaluronic acid. I put it on as a serum every day,
Yeah.
and it's reduced
Yep.
my crow's feet."
It's
Well, I
not
said,
helping me.
so I say to them, "Well, if you do it here, what did it do for your neck or your abdomen? Nothing, because it's local and topical. So let's get the hyaluronic acid orally. One of the great things is people don't appreciate hyaluronic acid is a fiber. It's one of the very few
That's right.
fibers sourced from animals.
Mm-hmm.
It's a spectacular fiber because it blooms those butyrate producing species.
Mm.
So it adds to skin, and it also goes to your dermal layer of skin. It gets partially broken down by bacteria. Then its fragments go to the skin, where it increases further production of dermal collagen and adds to water retention for plumpness in the
Mhm.
dermal layer of skin. So hyaluronic acid, even though lots of ladies know about it as a topical product, is a wonderful agent to be taken orally. And then the astaxanthin is just one example of a carotenoid. It's
Mhm.
a spectacular anti-inflammatory effects. It also adds to body composition effects. It reduces waist circumference, for instance, um, and it adds to sun protection.
Yeah,
So,
sun.
mhm.
I've heard that
So
a
the
lot.
combination, by the way, of vitamin D and a carotenoid like astaxanthin, lycopene is another really good carotenoid that you get from
Hmm.
tomato products, for instance, especially like tomato paste, extremely enriched in lycopene.
Hmm.
But you get the astaxanthin combined with vitamin D. You're not impervious. It's just you're much more resistant to sun damage.
Yeah, that's I know friends in Kona make bioastin is a supplement I've learned about years ago. They have that for staying out in the sun and not to get as much skin damage, taking that product. And then I know it's sold all over Costco now, so it's got to be a little more popular, but for skin health that way, it's pretty interesting combination. Now, what about delivery system? If we don't want to do the organ meats and we want to get the sources internally, what you're saying in a capsule form, we can get that versus eating it. Is it as
Mhm.
effective?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I prefer that we all eat brain and tongue, but
Yeah, not going
most
to
people
happen
don't
over
want
here.
to. No, no, most people are not going to do that. So these are convenient modern workarounds, and they are equally effective. They're quite effective and convenient. You can either get, so there are many ways to do this. Some people get a product that combines all four.
Mm.
Some people just want to get the reuteri and use it as yogurt and then add those other pieces on their own, like maybe
Mm.
add some bovine collagen, some hyaluronic acid, very easy to source, and astaxanthin. You can do that separately. Of course, fermented foods are things you make in your own home, or you can buy them pre-fermented from a lot of grocery stores now. Over the last
Mhm.
5 years, it's improved a lot. You can get commercially fermented sauerkraut, kimchi, kefir, all kinds of stuff now. Though I tell people when you do that, if you buy, say, commercial sauerkraut, let it sit on your kitchen counter for about 48 hours at least. Let it ferment further because part of commercial production is go as fast as possible for maximum profit. So we're going to ferment longer, but that's real important also. But there are a number of ways to do this, and it's very easy
So
and
I
very
find
effective.
a lot of people don't like taking supplements. A lot of people take too many supplements and they don't absorb them. And I heard once that you only absorb 60% or some high number that you don't get what you take in capsules and forms. So it's always nicer to eat through food but getting a delivery system as what I like making the Sibo yogurt, supercut yogurt, because it is just easier way delivery into my body that seems to be feels more effective taking that in rather than a capsule form.
A nice side benefit, Deb, of restoring the reuteri specifically is it improves digestive capacity.
Mm.
So all those people, half the U.S. population who have the infestation of their small intestine by fecal microbes, that includes an infestation of the duodenum. And
Mhm.
that's where both bile and pancreatic enzymes are released. And
Yeah.
if you have fecal microbes in the duodenum, which is very, very common, you might experience it as acid reflux or bloating or diarrhea or irritable bowel syndrome or other conditions. So when those fecal microbes are in the duodenum, they block the action of bile and pancreatic enzymes. And it's
Mm.
very difficult to digest food. It's very difficult to digest supplements and other things, even drugs. So when we take reuteri and it colonizes the small intestine and produces bacteriocins pushing back those fecal microbes, your digestion improves and breaking down food, especially proteins and fats, and supplements is more effective.
So all these people, I see this pattern that have probably SIBO, as you're saying, so many signs and symptoms relate to SIBO, but also poor gallbladder function or the gallbladder removed because they had whatever issues the doctor said, no, take it out. Let's not solve why you have problems. So that's all related, it sounds to be what's going on in your upper part of the small intestinal tract.
Yeah, interestingly, recent evidence, a lot of the science in the microbiome is fairly recent because up until recently, all microbes were identified by culturing them, growing in a petri dish.
Mm-hmm.
But become clear that the vast majority of microbes in the human body cannot be cultured. So now that we have DNA sequencing, that has also evolved over time. But now we have so-called complete DNA sequencing. There's a world, a universe of microbes that we didn't know were there. For instance, no one knew that the bladder has its own unique microbiome. The uterus has a microbiome. The airways the brain has a microbiome. And we didn't know any of this before. And so if you take someone's gallstones taken out at surgery and you look at them with DNA sequencing, the stones are filled with fecal microbes. Now, wait a minute here. The gallbladder is 24 feet up from the colon, where fecal microbes are supposed to be. How did fecal microbes get into the gallbladder? SIBO, right?
Mm-hmm.
Likewise, pancreatic cancer. Pancreatic cancer is filled with fecal microbes, and we didn't know this. So you can see this is a change in conversation. Is SIBO the risk factor for pancreatic cancer?
Hmm.
We already know that SIBO and colonic dysbiosis and species like Fusobacterium nucleatum are drivers of colon cancer risk. That's a very interesting topic, by the way, way off topic for skin. But it's become clear that there's a microbe called Fusobacterium nucleatum that comes from the mouth. And when you brush or floss any micro trauma to the mouth, it enters the bloodstream and then colonizes your colon, where the evidence is very strong. It's a driving factor in colon cancer.
Hmm.
So the whole
Wow.
reason I got off topic was this whole world of microbiome is opening doors we didn't even know were there,
Yeah.
and it's telling us all kind, and including now, 10 years ago, if you would have said, "Hey, Bill, I think the microbiome is a major player in skin health," I said, "You're nuts, Deb. There's no such thing." But it's become clear, oh yeah, the microbiome is a major factor in determining skin health appearance and youthfulness.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, good way to tie that back in. So it's kind of feels like it all relates to also the SIBO. If small intestinal bacterial overgrowth is hard to test for, so do we just assume most people have SIBO and figure out how to eliminate it with taking these probiotics and working on your food plan? Talk about the Super Gut book to
Well,
improve skin health
several
overall.
things to know. So you can look for what I call telltale signs.
Yeah.
So if you have any kind of food intolerance, which is very common, could be FODMAPs, could be histamine-containing foods, could be nightshades, fructose, on and on. Those are all examples of SIBO causing the food intolerance. The problem is not the food. The problem is the SIBO.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's one telltale sign. Another is fat droplets in the toilet. So as we talked about, fecal microbes in the duodenum block digestion of fats, or protein fragment, meat fragments also in the toilet. Those are signs of SIBO. There are also conditions that are so highly associated with SIBO that if you have them, you can pretty much assume you've got it. Fibromyalgia, probably 100% associated with SIBO. Irritable bowel syndrome, neurodegenerative disorders, autoimmune conditions, obesity, type 2 diabetes, fatty liver, irritable bowel syndrome. In other words, these are so highly associated. Now, if the solution we're proposing, Deb, is something awful, like surgical removal of your small intestine, well, then we better be damn confident, right? What if the solution is something that looks and smells like yogurt that you make in your kitchen? I call that SIBO yogurt. It starts with Lactobacillus reuteri, small intestine colonization, bacteriocin production. We add Lactobacillus gasseri, which likewise does the same thing. And that combination, those two are extremely powerful in eradicating SIBO. It takes about 4 weeks or more, though, made as the yogurt to high counts.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Optionally, we add Bacillus coagulans for similar reasons. I'm not clear on whether that's really necessary or not, but so far, out of about 75 people or so who've done this informally, about 90% will convert to SIBO negative. Now, how do we know that? Well, we have this device. the air
Air
device?
device. Yep.
Okay. So this is the original. This is the more new one. This measures hydrogen gas. This measures hydrogen gas and methane. And you blow into it. It talks to your smartphone, 0 to 10. What it is, it's a mapping device. It tells you where in the GI tract fecal microbes are living. So there's a protocol we follow. It's very simple. Baseline, there's a prep diet, then a baseline level, then ingest something that microbes metabolize. We use inulin because it's metabolized by most fecal microbes. And then we measure every 30, 45 minutes over about 90 minutes. And if you have a big uptick, let's say a baseline value of 1.2, it's low, it goes to 9.8, 0 to 10. That means you have SIBO living in the upper GI tract, in the stomach, duodenum, jejunum. And now you know you have SIBO. Downside of this, it gets a little bit complicated. If you're getting lactobacillus reuteri, it will cause a positive reading on your hydrogen gas. So what we have to do, let's say you make that SIBO yogurt, you take it for 4 weeks or more, and your food intolerances go away. But you want to prove it with the air device. You have to actually stop the reuteri for 2 weeks, then test. So that's the only complexity with this stuff. So you don't need the air device. It is helpful. I find the air device helpful, Deb, for recurrences. So let's say your initial symptoms with SIBO were food intolerances and irritable bowel syndrome, bloating and diarrhea and abdominal pain. You take the SIBO yogurt, 4 or 6 weeks, whatever. Oh, it's gone. You can now eat the eggs you couldn't eat before, or the histamine-containing foods, whatever. You can now eat it safely. 6 months later, you have a panic attack or some weird diarrhea. Is this SIBO or not? Because the recurrence of SIBO can be different than the initial symptoms because the microbial composition of your SIBO can change. So let's say your initial SIBO was dominated by Klebsiella and E. coli, let's say. Then the recurrence is dominated by Staphylococcus and Enterococcus. So different kinds of syndromes. That's where I find the air device truly helpful.
Yeah, pinpoint it. So going back to histamine, I find a lot of people, I was just doing this yesterday with someone, are feeling reaction on their skin, as we talked about skin health with histamine containing foods. But often I've read what you've said and listened to the histamine is more, again, going back to improving the bacteria in the small intestine to help with histamine reaction to high histamine foods.
The only difficulty here is that reuteri provokes histamine. Histamine is a good thing, but some people do it to excessive quantities. So if somebody has that histamine reaction to reuteri, several choices. You could reduce the intake rather than a half cup, maybe a tablespoon, and let it take root over time. That's one way to do it. If that doesn't work and you don't tolerate that well, then it's time to resort to antibiotics, like the herbal antibiotic regimens. There's only 2 herbal antibiotic regimens that have been scrutinized formally in studies, and that's the candibactin regimen and the FC-cytyl dysbiocide regimen. Not my first choices. My first choice is the SIBO yogurt, because it's the SIBO yogurt that not only kills off the fecal microbes in your small intestine, it also begins the process of reestablishing a healthy microbiome while also giving you smoother skin, better musculature, better immune response. The antibiotics don't do any of that. But if you find just can't do the SIBO yogurt, that's when the herbal antibiotics have a helpful role.
Yeah, and that's in your Super Gut book. You write that out, outline that
When I
very
wrote
well.
the Super Gut book, I didn't fully appreciate how powerful the SIBO yogurt would be. So I didn't offer it as the first strategy, but it's become our first strategy. And it's, as you point, it's easy to do. The only hassle is obtaining the microbes, but I put that in the Super Gut book, where to get the microbes. It's easy. But once you get the microbes, you never have to do it again because you make future batches from a little of the prior batch. Just like your garden, if I give you a tomato and you harvest the seeds, you've got seeds for next season. You save a tomato. Yeah, same thing here.
Yeah. And I found using BioQuest, their microbe, they have their sugar shift scoop of that, or I've used the culture company that has L-reuteri or the Gaceri one. And you put, so you're saying do both of those perhaps is a good way to start your base
You
for
can
your yogurt.
co-ferment them, or you can ferment them separately.
Mm.
We're kind of gravitating towards fermenting this separately. What we don't know, Deb, when you co-ferment 2 or 3 species, if there's a shift in the relative numbers over time, let's say
Yeah.
your 5th batch or 10th batch, we just don't know. We're going to do that analysis down the road. But you can see there's so many questions here we need to answer. It just takes time and money.
Yeah, for sure. Now, so order of operations, we are getting through the aging process with the motivation to improve how we age from the inside out, to improve skin health and under eye region. It's my area. And then just, you see people skin in their chest and their legs. And so you're saying to start with how we eat and what we eat, when, why, all that stuff. But organ meats, make the yogurt, get the collagen, hyaluronic acid through foods, and the astaxanthin. Is there kind of a package or more of an all-in-one if people want to do something, keep it simple? So, or what do you suggest people to get started if they want to, okay, I'm 50s, my hormones are getting lower. What should I do to improve this aging skin health fitness routine?
Well, this whole conversation for me got started as the wheat belly conversation. That is elimination of wheat, grains, and sugars, and then replacement of nutrients missing from modern life, like
Mhm.
magnesium, omega-3s. That still matters. So
Mhm.
if somebody needs their handheld, I do have something we call the Gut to Glow 30-day Beautiful Skin Challenge. It's a private Facebook page. It's
Mm.
free, but you sign up. We do it like once every couple of months, and we help you navigate the diet, how to manage your vitamin D and your magnesium. In this case, how to get those 4 nutrients as a product we make. Um, and then lots of conversations on other things, like what's the importance of facial fat, facial
Mm.
muscle, what's the role of red light,
Yeah, I was just
um,
going to ask that next.
what's the
Because I
role of
always think
fermented
of
foods.
stacking red light and sauna and those. I mean, not so much sauna, but the red light therapy is so big on skin health. Are you saying to stack that with taking these foods?
One thing we don't know, Deb, is so if you do what we do in my program, if you add red light to increase dermal collagen, is there an additional effect over and above what? I don't know. We've not done that study. But here's my red light.
Oh, is that a
But
Juve or is it a big panel?
it's a V4. It's the cheapest one you can get. So I remind people, because there's a lot of hype
Yes.
over red light coming from the manufacturers of the devices. So while we need better science, several things to know. One is you cannot do better than sunlight. Now, you
Mhm.
live in a place you have a lot of sunlight. You don't need a red light
Mhm.
because you just go outside.
Yep.
So all you're trying to do is mimic the sun. Though the only advantage of a red light device is that it does not have ultraviolet radiation, because
Mhm.
that it's ultraviolet that causes you to burn and it accelerates skin aging because it causes you to reabsorb your collagen, your dermal collagen. So, but where I am, where it's in the last 30 days, Deb, I've seen the sun
Oh,
3 times.
oh,
Yeah, so I can't go outside, and it's 10
yeah.
degrees.
Yes.
So I can't go outside and get light. So in this climate, I use a red light.
Mm-hmm.
And we're
Yeah.
talking about a minute and a half,
Mm,
several
okay.
times a week. You don't, and one thing you do not need is one of these fancy body wide devices that people pay thousands of dollars, 4,000, 5,000. You don't need that because the science has become clear. So Glenn Jeffries' evidence is probably the cleanest. He took a bunch of people, shirts off, and shone red light on their upper backs or no light, and then did a glucose tolerance test, which is amazing when you think about it.
Yeah.
Think of this. And the people who got red light had better handling of glucose, lower area under
Mm.
the curve, lower peak glucose, and higher breath CO2 as a reflection of glucose metabolism. Now, wait a minute. Shining red light in your upper back improves metabolic health that's probably mediated via muscle, heart, lung, liver. What? But that and about 10 other studies have suggested that the area of application may not matter. Maybe eye health and brain health may be exceptions, but that evidence is weak so far. In other words, there's great evidence that red light to the eyes benefits visual acuity, reduces nearsightedness in children, may reduce macular degeneration. So that may be direct application, or sunlight may be necessary. But in general, the location does not matter. And you look at but look at these ads. They're charging you thousands of dollars. I paid $82 for this device, Deb. That's all you
Wow.
really need if you live in
Yeah.
a climate like I do. But the flip side of this, not so much important for skin though, is to also minimize blue exposure, not just for sleep and melatonin, but because it also adds to cataracts and macular
Mm.
degeneration. So that was a problem for me because I fell into the conversation of replacing all your home lights with LEDs, which
Yep.
means we're overexposed to the blue wavelength. And I had my desk lamp right here. I had two LEDs because it increases concentration and focus, and it was causing my vision to deteriorate. So I
Mm.
replaced the two LEDs here with old-fashioned incandescent bulbs that contain
Mhm.
red wavelengths. And within
Mm.
48 hours, my vision normalized once again. And
Hmm.
so but I remind people because the hype is just over the top right now. You
Yes.
just get sun unless you live in a climate like I do, in which case red light does help a minute and a half several times a week, but it cannot do any better than sunlight. I tell people that because they say, I'm going to cure my cancer with red light. I'm going to rebuild my joint cartilage with, no, it's no better than sunlight minus
Yeah.
ultraviolet.
Yeah. Well, I call it the dawn patrol. We go out in the morning, go for a hike, and the sun's just before the sun comes up, so dawn, and just watching the sun come up. And I just was talking to my family yesterday actually about the benefits of the gazing at the sun when it's just coming up and the red light from that. It's just so
That's the way you're
powerful versus
supposed to
later in
do
the
it.
day.
Yes.
Yeah. Just get
I
up,
would
go
do
to
the
bed
same if
earlier.
I could.
Yeah, if you had sun. I know. And it's funny. I was at Christmas time at my sister's in Washington State, and it was rainy and it's dark, and I could feel the shift in energy, and I felt claustrophobic, anxious. I needed air and I needed to see the sun, and I just couldn't. We're inside, and it's just amazing how you feel when you're in nature and natural sunlight, lighting, and all that changes. I want to finish with I don't know, it's a long conversation, but just if you have any insight on skin health, and we're talking about the microbiome, but the relationship with insulin sensitivity, insulin resistance, and the mitochondria and metabolic health, but anything kind of note on that of our skin health as we age, and insulin resistance seems to be such a big area, and how that might connect. We talked about skin tags, but anything with skin health and insulin resistance, whole tying that all together.
So we find that insulin resistance can be turned around very rapidly. Uh, that is, this process that leads to type 2 diabetes, skin tags, as you point
Mhm.
out, risk for coronary disease, risk for cognitive impairment and dementia, increased risk for breast cancer, other cancers, hypertension, etc. So having insulin resistance, not good. And it's so easy to turn around. How do we do it? Easy. Don't eat foods that raise blood glucose, therefore insulin, wheat, grains, and sugars. Replace nutrients that impact insulin, vitamin D, omega-3 fatty acids, magnesium, and iodine. Address the microbiome that is a source of colonic dysbiosis and SIBO, and thereby endotoxemia, a major driver of insulin resistance. And a great start would be Lactobacillus reuteri. Fermented foods help also. And then even those other things we talked about, collagen, hyaluronic acid, astaxanthin, also add their own effects on minimizing insulin resistance. And it's probably the big reason why there's a marked reduction in waist circumference, because it's abdominal fat that drives insulin resistance. And so getting rid of insulin, even if you're a type 2 diabetic, for the vast majority, about 90% of people with type 2 diabetes, it's real easy to normalize insulin resistance in the majority, just not with drugs. That's the perverted world we live in, where if there's not a big pot of gold for the pharmaceutical industry, no one wants to be
Yeah.
bothered. But the reality is, in the vast majority of cases, you can normalize completely insulin resistance, even in type 2 diabetics, back to ideal with just a few efforts.
Mhm. Amazing. I know we're out of time and you've probably a busy day, but where can people go to learn more? As your inner circle I'm a part of, I think that's a pretty powerful place. People want to learn more. What would you suggest to people who want to improve how they age from the inside out?
So for my learning, for information, my blog, williamdavismd.com. As you point out, the innercircle.drdavisinfinitehealth.com. And then I'll have to separately list some commercial sources for products.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate your insight and coming back on the show to talk about this big area that I think a lot of people might not be aware of, that it's, you are what you eat, and how to increase our skin health from the inside out is all the different products out there. Think about, is it working? And with anything you do, is what I'm doing working for me, and not get the definition of insanity doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results. So going back to our foundations and working from the inside out, starting with the gut, and even we talked about the vagal nerve, but just the microbiome itself is so fascinating, and ongoing research, and we can learn more in your podcast because you keep sharing new information there every week. Good.
Thanks for listening, Deb.
Yeah. Thank you so much. And we'll hopefully hear people's information or success stories in the Gut to Glow program. You have the 30-day program. We can put the link into that too.
Oh, yeah.
See how
Right.
people
Thank you.
respond.
Yes.
All right. Thank
Thanks,
you.
Deb.